Hey everybody, well I thought I'd do two in one day. It's been a couple days since I've come on, and this is one I've wanted to talk about for a while now, but it came up again today for me and for somebody else I know, and I'm figuring if it's coming up for me and somebody else, it's probably coming up for a lot of us, maybe potentially in this, so I thought I'd speak to it. And that is this idea that as we're going through benzo withdrawal, we're basically like turtles without shells. And so let me go back and kind of explain what I mean by a turtle without a shell, or what I mean by a shell in general. As we as humans navigate life, we accumulate what I call like psychic defenses. And what I mean by that is that no one goes through life unscathed. I don't care how well attuned your parents were, how healthy your family system was and the dynamic was. We all go through lives and we all get hurt. And we all have our vulnerabilities, we all have our Achilles heel, we all have our insecurities. And as a result of that, we build, as we age, we build up our defenses. Now, some of us in life build what we call very low-level defenses. And these low-level defenses are things like denial, or splitting, or projection. And so people that kind of go through life with these being their primary defenses, we often associate them with what we call kind of a lower EQ, a lower emotional intelligence, okay? They're not really kind of masters of relationship. And I'll come back to the denial, splitting, and projection, but what they also tend to have is well, I'll get into that in a second. So denial, splitting, or projection are like some of the lower level defenses. And again, this is often associated with lower emotional intelligence. However, even those of us that have higher emotional intelligence, and I'll explain what that is in a second, we can all resort to these lower level of defenses in times of crisis, right? I don't care how attuned we are, how emotionally responsible we are, how connected we are, how highly attached we are. We can all, in times of crisis, deny reality. We can all split off and externalize blame. And we can all project our anger, grief, or insecurity onto others. All of us can do that at times. What really warrants a lower emotional intelligence or a higher emotional intelligence is where you live most of the time. It's not where you visit. We can all visit shitty behavior. But if we live in shitty behavior, if we live in where our defenses are to deny reality, that's not true. I didn't say that. That's not what I said, and inherent in that can come a lot of gaslighting of people, right? Where, your partner or somebody in your family or a friend says something hurtful and you go to explain to them your feelings are hurt and they tell you never said it. So that kind of denial that also goes along with gaslighting, splitting, we all know people that do this. We might do this at times as well, where I'm going to tell this person this thing, and then I'm going to go over here and tell this person this thing, and I'm going to kind of split off. I'm not going to be whole in my expression of myself with another person. I'm going to kind of split people. And this is often where we kind of people get pitted against each other. And again, this is a lower level defense, also inherent in this are people who kind of take delight in other people's misfortunes, also a lower EQ, right? And then projection, projecting our own anger, frustration, insecurity, sadness, whatever onto other people. That's not mine. It's you. You're the one that's angry all the time. You're the one that's always doing this. You're the one that's always leaving. You're the one that's always abandoning, whatever, that projection that happens. Again, lower level EQs. And again, we can all visit these places, but it's more the folks that kind of live there. And another, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Then there's higher level defenses. And these defenses are things like humor, our ability to have some levity with ourselves and other people, our ability to kind of laugh at ourselves a little bit and give ourselves a lot of grace and room and flexibility. Sublimation is another what we call higher level defense. And an example of this would be, you might recognize that you have a lot of aggression, and so you become a football player or a wrestler, and you sublimate that aggression into something that is valued and that is good. If we are more controlling, we might realize I'm better at being my own boss than putting myself in situations where I have a boss. Okay, so we've sublimated this aggression into being a football player. We've sublimated our controlling nature into being an amazing entrepreneur and being our own boss. These are higher level defenses. The ability to reason and rationalize and use our wise mind. These are also higher level defenses, okay? Higher people that have higher level defenses and are often with a higher emotional intelligence allow people that have this, are able to say things like, they were probably doing the best that they could, or I'm sorry, I was doing the best that I could. People with higher level defenses are often able to be much more reflective. They're able to circle back and own their stuff and be somewhat operate with some humility. And they're able to do what I call mentalizing better. And I maybe talked about this at some point, but mentalizing is basically a really important skill set, and it's one that we all can do to a certain extent, many of us better or worse than others. But it's basically being aware of your own thoughts and feelings while you're simultaneously thoughtful about what the other person's thinking and feeling. You're holding both in mind. You're genuinely curious about yourself and the other person. You don't operate with pathological certainty. You're truly curious. You allow people to grow and to be different and to change. You're able to be clear and consistent. You know where you end and another person begins. You've got good boundaries. You're able to be self-compassionate and empathic. So you're holding this balance between yourself and other in a really nice way. And again, folks that tend to be good mentalizers are often have a higher emotional intelligence, and they usually have a higher level of psychic defense. And there's an emotional flexibility to them. But what happens in benzo withdrawal is pretty remarkable, and I'm seeing it kind of across the board for many of us, is that whatever our psychic defenses are, they get stripped away. It can feel as if we've done no prior work on ourselves. Suddenly old wounds or young fears resurface, and it's as if there was never any scar tissue that was created around them. Suddenly we're open wounds. We're stripped raw, and in that rawness, we're terrified. And we're suddenly thrust into a world where we're now highly, highly sensitized, but we don't have the ability to rely on any of our defenses. Oftentimes, even the low-level ones, we don't even have access to. We're just kind of out there without a parachute, right? We're a turtle without a shell. So remember, as we're going through this, that we see the world as we are, not as it is. When we are in this state of rawness, we can feel like a scared child. In fact, Claire Weeks, who I always talk about, who talked a lot about highly sensitized states in people, said that a highly sensitized person like ourselves can be led by a child. That's how suggestible we are, right? And because we're stripped of our defenses, because it feels as if we've never done any work on ourselves, we feel like children in this often, we can begin to question ourselves. We can begin to question our past. We can begin to question the decisions we've made or the options we've chosen. And for those of us that have entered this particular hell of benzo withdrawal with higher levels of defense and the capacity to mentalize and a higher EQ, we can feel even crazier. We can feel like we've fallen down the rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland and wondering, where did our humor go? Where did our self-compassion go? Our capacity for empathy, our capacity to navigate emotionally complex terrain. Where did it go? Where did we go? Right? And suddenly we're looking back on our lives and we're remembering conflicts we had with people or challenging times in our lives and in our past. And we're wondering, maybe I never did work through it. Maybe it was never resolved. Okay, and this is where we need to pump the brakes and slow down a bit. Now, we ourselves oftentimes can't slow down to the speed of wisdom, right? Because wisdom itself is an internal knowing. And for many of us, we've lost our sense of selves temporarily in this process. So we have to kind of rely on the wisdom of others. So hopefully there's, whether it's me and these videos or a Geraldine Burns or a benzo coach or a family member that you can trust or a friend that's gotten involved with you and is interested in your path, that we have somebody or a few trusted folks on this journey that can remind us we are a turtle without a shell for now. It's temporary. We are not seeing our past, present, or future clearly. Okay, we're not seeing anything with the benefit of the rest of the story, the feel-good hormones and neurotransmitters. We're only seeing part of the story. We're seeing the most negative, skewed part of the story, the scariest part of the story. And this is where a harsh word from a partner can really level us. Whereas before this happened, maybe it would have hurt us, but we would have had the backbone to set a boundary or say, don't talk to me that way, or that hurt my feelings. Now we feel like we're made of toothpicks and bubble gum, and like a strong wind could come by and do us in. Again, the good news is this is temporary. Okay, but it's important for us to hold this in mind, because we don't want to be making a lot of big decisions in this emotionally. We may feel more easily slighted. We might take things more personally. We might feel more reactive because we're not operating at that level of a higher EQ. But guess what? No one is. No one is operating at a high level of EQ when they're stuck in a space of survival. Okay? So no one's processing their argument and trying to figure out their part in something. Get on their side of the street and think, okay, I don't really like how I handled that with my partner, while they're being tossed out of an airplane. No, they're being tossed out of the airplane and they're trying to figure out, do I have a parachute? And if I do, how do I use it? Okay? So we're not being thrown out of an airplane and in that moment thinking, well, I want to reflect back on how that conversation went with so-and-so. No. Okay, it's not happening that way. So if you're looking at your life and you're thinking, as you're going through benzo withdrawal, if you're looking at your life currently or in the past, you're thinking, damn, I thought I had resolved that. Why is it back? Or damn, I thought we'd worked that through. Why am I suddenly, stuck in that place where I said that thing that was so dumb, or they said that thing that was so hurtful? My God, that was 25 years ago. Why is this back? Or why can't I seem to handle any conflict right now? You have to remember, you're a raw, angry nerve. And our psychic protective gear that we've accumulated through our lives is not accessible to us, okay? What can even be more confusing is that in a window or in a moment where we feel better, we might feel that we can handle things and we can take on more emotional stuff, right? So we might start a complicated, I've done this many times, started very complicated emotional discussion with a partner, only to wake up the next morning and not able to finish it. Now I'm back in the riptide, and whatever access to my higher level self I had the night before, I don't have this morning. This becomes very confusing for our loved ones, where they're like, well, wait a second. Just last night we were having this very intense conversation and you were very present, and now today, you're rocking in a corner. We have to understand, and we have to hopefully have a couple people around us that understand this is not the time for us to jump into these conversations, nor is it a time for us to try to go back and problem solve and look at our lives and do deep diving into things, because again, we're not seeing things as it is, we are seeing things as we are. Another thing, I'll just touch on this briefly, but what I find with a lot of people that I've met that are going through this is, and part of why the people that I've met that struggle the most or struggle a lot in benzo withdrawals, we were people that were very functional, highly functional, problem solvers, doers, fixers. We might have been the ones in the relationship with the higher emotional intelligence. We were the ones that did most of the emotional heavy lifting maybe in our relationships. And we maybe took some emotional sacrifices along the way to be with people that maybe weren't quite at the level we were at. And we were able to be at this very high level of functioning. And now we've gotten leveled in benzo withdrawal. And the people around us who've relied on us to be the problem solvers, the fixers, the doers, the thinkers, the feelers, the mentalizers, the high EQ, are suddenly like feeling very betrayed by us, rejected, scared. Where did we go? They need us back. And we're thinking it's time for you to pick up the slack now. But important to remember, if you're going through any of this with your loved ones, because I've been through this before, when we think, well, it's time for you to pick up the slack. There's a difference between, and I've talked about this before, somebody who has the capacity to do something and chooses not to, and somebody who doesn't have the capacity to do it. And, I know that for me in my life, sometimes I've functioned at such a high level that I've overfunctioned for certain people in my life. And as a result of that, they haven't had to do a lot of the heavy work along the way. And suddenly when my legs came out from underneath me in benzo withdrawal, or when I got floxed, I'm expecting them to just be able to pick up the ball and run with it. But how can they do that when that's never really been part of the equation before? Okay. And so sometimes that's the other thing we find ourselves in. This is not only are we stripped of our defenses and we feel like raw nerves that none of our work has been done before, but suddenly all of our capacity to be the doer, the fixer, the problem solver, the mentalizer, the carrying the heavy emotional load of the family or the relationship or with the kids or whatever, and now we can't. We'd like to toss the baton off to the next person, but they might not be prepared. They might not have capacity. And we also have to try to figure out, while we're in this raw state, how do we make sense of that? So it's a long way of saying to go really easy on yourself in this, as well as, giving yourself and those around us a lot of grace, as well as, I've learned the hard way, don't do a lot of heavy emotional lifting when you get in a window, because that window can shut in an hour or a day or a week. And suddenly they're thinking, oh, great, she's back. She's going to pick it up where she left off. And then boom, the window closes and I'm back like a scared little turtle without a shell. And know that all the work you've done, this isn't really imperative, know that all the work you've done in your life, it's still there. Okay, the stuff you've worked through, the defenses, and a lot of times we use the word defense as if it's pejorative. They're so defensive. There's not a human being on this planet that does not have psychic defenses. We all do. We wouldn't be alive without them. Okay, so again, a lot of times when we say they're so defensive, we're meaning that in a pejorative way of a lower level defense, like they're blaming, they're externalizing blame, they're projecting, they're denying, they're avoiding, right? People that have higher level defenses, which are many of us in this, had them. Again, using levity and humor, able to mentalize, able to own your own shit, able to be reflective, able to repair a rupture in a relationship. We had all that, but now we don't have access to it to the same degree in any way, shape, or form that we did before. So know that the work you've done before, it's still there. Okay. It doesn't mean that we're not still growing and learning in this. And as I've been stripped of my defenses and I'm like a scared naked child running through the world, terrified of my own shadow suddenly, and I was not this person for, 4.5 decades, more than 4.5 decades of my life. I am now. I still believe not only will I come through this and all the work I had done before will be there waiting for me, but I also think I'm going to come out stronger for it. Okay, because I've had to now learn a whole new set of skills to navigate terrain that I never would have had to normally navigate in a normal existence without benzo withdrawal or without getting into this highly sensitized state. So again, going easy on yourself, giving yourself a lot of grace and those around you grace, recognizing that you're seeing the world as you are, not as it is, that you're stripped of these defenses temporarily. And so we're not in a place to do a lot of, not only are we not able to do a lot of emotional heavy lifting, we're not really seeing the world properly, and that's why I'm saying a lot of people will say, gosh, it feels like all this stuff's coming back, like I never did any work on it, like it was never resolved. Maybe I was just suppressing it all these years. No, not necessarily at all. But again, our psychic defenses are stripped, okay? And we're left raw and exposed. And with that, we feel everything. It's that tin can I always talk about. So go easy on yourself, give yourself and those around you a lot of grace, and recognize that we are doing the best we can. Probably the people around us are too. And again, if you have been a high functioning person in this, and you might have over-functioned for people in your life before, your children, your partner, your friends, your family, as much as we want to hand off the baton and say, now do for us what I've done for you for years or whatever, they might not be able to do that. And it's not out of not caring for us or loving us. They may not be equipped. They may be out of practice, or they might not even have the capacity to do it. So, it's a scary time. I get that. But the good news, and I really want to say this, is it's temporary. And and it really does give us an opportunity to practice giving ourselves a lot of grace and practicing a lot of flexibility, and a lot of self-compassion, even though it is so hard to drum that up in the moment. Okay, so imagine if you can get glimpses of self-compassion in this, if you can get glimpses of flexibility, if you can get glimpses of grace, imagine what you're going to do when all the rest of that neurochemistry comes back online and you have everything you've worked for and more. We're going to be better than we were before. Thanks, guys.